Greetings and welcome to Can Machines Think? The Problem of Knowledge Representation. This is taken from another paper, rather academic and probably not really fit just to read, so I've made a little presentation out of it. And this is from 1999, so 4 years after the one we just reviewed, and see what kind of advances, and now that we're familiar with a lot of the terms that knowledge means in the digital form, let's dive into it here. And welcome and greetings to you all. Let's get started. So this is based on Franz Baader's seminal work that was in 1999. He is one of the universities there in Germany. I can't think off the top of my head which one. Nevertheless, sure it was illustrious. That said, let's get going here onto this. So what is knowledge, first of all? So a database stores facts, but intelligence requires meaning, the difference between a list and understanding. As we saw in the previous presentation, how just having the answer key to a few things isn't enough context to build the meaning. And here we're saying intelligence requires meaning. I'd probably even take this a level further into more of a statistical way of looking at this and seeing it from that lens, that you could say that data is random and miscellaneous, where knowledge is orderly and cumulative. That said, let's move on to the next slide. So the classical logical problem here is that reality is incomplete. We never have all the facts, which is part of the beauty of living in the real world. There's always something new to discover. Reality is also uncertain, though. Things might be true, must be true, but they could be false, as we see time and time again. Another problem is that reality changes. What's true today may not be true tomorrow. And of course, perspectives differ. Agents know different things. So traditional logic wasn't built for the messy, real world. As we saw before, that the simple little logical formulas could be valid, but definitely not true. Let's move along. So there's three elegant solutions, though. They're different tools for the different dimensions of knowledge. The structure is the description logics, so how concepts relate. This is our alignment of ontology, of meaning, how the concepts relate. There's a perspective, there's modal logistics, what might be or must be. But then there's also the revision aspect of it. So we have a perspective, but then there's the revision. So to the perspective, and to revise, a revision of it, it's a this would be, you could say it's non-monotonic, but the base here, monotony, so non-monotonic, but I think it's supposed to be non-monotonic logics. It'd be fun to say non-monotonic, non-monotonic, well, never mind. A little tongue-tied there on that word there. It can be a twister. So we'll say that defaults that yield to evidence. So when we have something that might be or must be true, but it's not, well, the default that yields, they default to these things, but it must yield to the evidence of what's the situation currently, or whatever the result needs to be able to revise the logic. So it's not a strict formal type of logic. You have those modal logics, different modes, what might be or must be, but then you have revisions that are able to override, so to speak, the perspectives. Let's move along. So here's our description logics, thinking in hierarchies. Humans organize knowledge through concepts and categories. A tree frog isn't just a random collection of properties. It inherits everything from frog, which inherits from amphibian, which inherits from animal. The structure becomes inference. You define the concepts precisely, and then the relationships emerge automatically. So by defining the concepts precisely, those relationships are seen. So we're not making the relationships by defining them. It's a matter of precisely defining them as they are in reality. Then the relationships emerge. So there's a two-step thing here in the description logistics. So this is one concept here. Move along. So, of course, the modal logistics. We've seen these, the modus ponens and all these other great ones here. Truth has context. Not everything is simply true or false. Some things are necessarily true, possibly true, believed to be true, or true at certain times. Modal reasoning lets machines think about what they don't know, what might happen, and how different agents see the world. So for a comparative nature here, if you look at, even from electronics here and making a logic decision here, you'd have circuits for comparing different voltages, etc. Same thing here when you're looking at strengths of arguments. Which one would have the highest potential? Let's move along. So non-monotonic logics. Non-monotonic, not non-monotonic. Monotonic would sound pretty cool, but I think we're going to stick with the standard non-monotonic logics. Intelligence means changing your mind. Birds fly. Penguins are birds. Therefore, penguins fly. Now, see, that's your monotonic logics, right? Your modal logics there, but classical logic can't handle this gracefully. Once something is proven, it stays proven. But non-monotonic reasoning allows defaults to be overridden. It's how humans actually think. So we're able to override certain kinds of reasoning based on what our observations or physical experiences or otherwise might be. So let's move along. The fundamental trade-off. So it's more expressive when you can say more complex things, and of course more tractable when it actually compute answers. So every knowledge representation system must choose where to sit on this spectrum. So do you want to have more expressive, be able to have more options, so to speak, be able to say more complex structured statements, premises, conclusions, things like that. So that's one way to look at it. Or you look at it from what's easier to handle and actually compute the answers, that kind of thing. What's more tractable. So in computer programming, having something that's easier to handle is a lot, it computes the answers, it's an easy execution, whereas having something more expressive to say more complex things runs into just as reality, the unknown territory. So how do you account for the unknown unknown? It's nice when everything can be handled easily, but does it cover everything in reality? So every knowledge representation system must choose where to sit on this spectrum. So no single logic rules them all. Real intelligent systems combine these approaches. They use description logics for taxonomies, so there are different categories and the way they're organizing that. Modal logics for uncertainty and time, because you can run different models, and non-monotonic logics for defaults. So anytime there's something that really sticks out, you can default to the non-monotonic logics. The art is choosing the right combination for your domain. Granted, this is 1999, so here we are, some quarter century later. Where has this gotten? The deeper question, though, is does a machine that manipulates symbols according to semantic rules truly understand? Or is it just an increasingly sophisticated simulation? So logic-based knowledge representation doesn't answer this question. but it gives machines the tools to structure meaning, reason beyond explicit facts, and revise beliefs, the building blocks of what we call intelligence. So by combining all those forms of reasoning that we saw there, but is it still just a sophisticated simulation? Let's find out. Well, that takes us, I guess, right to the quiz, aren't we? That was quick. Very quick, brief paper from Mr. Baader here. So we ended up with our deep question, but now we're on to our best part of the presentation for those of you who are here, the quiz. So here's how we do this. When we go through the questions, you put in the chat the number of the question and then the letter of the selection that you choose. And then if that's your final answer, that's great. Otherwise, if you want to revise, just put it in again. The last answer you put in for that question number will be your final answer. And then we'll go on to the next questions. And then just remember to put in the question number followed by the letter of your answer. All right, let's get started here with question 1. An AI system has memorized every statute, regulation, and case ever written. Why might it still not understand the law? A, because it lacks enough computing power. B, because memorization doesn't show how the rules connect or apply. C, because legal language is too old-fashioned. Or D, because AI systems can't read footnotes. All right, so we get selections here. I believe we have talking chat enabled. Let me double check here to make sure.
The tribe says, hit the like.
Yes, indeed. All right, any takers for question 1? This is about an AI system. Now, this is adapting what we've learned here in the text to our modern day systems here.
Bill Thimmeth 4426 says 1B.
All right, we got 1B. Any other takers for question 1?
Craig Curry G5E says 1B.
All right. 1B looks like a pretty good selection here because especially nowadays, if we're talking AI system, I think we're in today's world. Computing power is almost a given these days. All right, any other takers? Question 1. We're going to go head on to question 2. Question 2. 2 AI systems are given the exact same legal rules, but produce different answers. What's the most worrying explanation? A, one system is faster than the other. B, one system uses more memory. C, the meaning of the rules depends on how the systems run them. Or D, one system has more training data. Now, these are to get you to think a little bit more into what we just learned here from 1999 and considering that AI systems are an expansion of these basic fundamental rules of logic reasoning. Then what would be the best selection here for question 2? 2 AI systems. They're given the exact same legal rules, but they produce different answers.
Craig Curry G5E says 2C.
We have 2 C's. The meaning of the rules depends on the systems that run them. So good answer there. Of course, technical abilities could cause be able to run more simulations to come up with different answers too. So memory and system speed could be considerations, but it depends on the limitations. But I think fundamentally, we definitely have also the system having more training data. Not sure if that goes with given the exact same legal rules. So should be a good, easy one there. Any other takers? Question 2. We're moving on to question 3. An AI assumes birds can fly and later learns it's dealing with a penguin. What should happen? A, the AI should stick with its original conclusion. B, the AI should crash due to a contradiction. C, the AI should quietly revise its conclusion. Or D, the AI should mark all birds as flightless. So think about this, as we were talking about the different forms of reasoning, the non-monotonic and the modal reasoning. AI should stick with the original conclusions. It assumes birds can fly. It later learns it's dealing with a penguin. And of course, in dealing with the penguin, it figures out that penguins don't fly. So should the AI stick with its original conclusion that all birds can fly? Or should
Credit per EG5E says 3C. Built Limit 4426 says 3C.
All right, so we have two takers for 3C. Let's move on to question 4. And you guys can always pipe up to previous questions, just put in the number. All right, question 4. Why might silence be meaningful to an AI system making a decision? Wow, so silence. A, silence always means approval. B, silence is irrelevant to reasoning. C, silence can count as no evidence against a conclusion. Or D, silence proves the system lacks information. So here's where it gets down to some real practical AI application question here. Why might silence be meaningful, meaning giving meaning? And again, our understanding of meaning from the previous presentation was the level, the depth of connections that have been made between different symbols. And this is here where the silence is going to be meaningful to an AI system making a decision.
Credit per EG5E says 4B.
So we have 4B, silence is irrelevant to reasoning. Any other takers for question 4? So let me read these answers again. Silence always means approval. B, silence is irrelevant to reasoning. C, silence can count as no evidence against a conclusion. Or D, silence proves the system lacks information. So we have some good, this is a hard question here. Any other takers on question 4? We're going to be moving on to the final slide with the answer key. All right, we're on to the answer key. Question 1, the answer. AI memorized every legal document. Why might it not?
Built Limit 4426 says 4C.
Okay, just in time. We'll take that for the latency delay here. So question 1, the answer was B. Memorization doesn't show how rules connect or apply. Understanding depends on relationships, those connections, those relationships, categories, and reasoning, not just recall. So simply looking at the answer key on the Chinese room experiment isn't enough to build understanding. It's just recall. See this, do that. Okay, question 2. Two AI systems, same rules, different answers. What's the most worrying explanation? And the most worrying one is C. The meaning depends on how the system runs them. If meaning changes based on execution, conclusions become arbitrary, undermining trust and fairness. So you see right there, this is the big thing here. When you have different systems producing different answers, it undermines trust and fairness. And it seems that conclusions are arbitrary. All right, question 3. AI assumes birds fly and then learns it's a penguin. What should happen? And of course, the answer is C. The AI should quietly revise its conclusion. That's the non-monotonic reasoning. It enables reasonable assumptions that yield gracefully.
Says late.
Oh, better late than never. And I guess we're at the answer key here. So, all right. So, anyways, the
Audit them says late to the party.
Well, the party might still be going on. Let's see here.
List B 2001 says better Nate than Lever.
Yes, indeed. Okay, so the non-monotonic reasoning enables reasonable assumptions that yield gracefully to exceptions. So it has a certain model, but then it discovers that there's an exception. It needs to yield to the exceptions gracefully. That's the non-monotonic reasoning method there. And then we go on to the final question 4. Why might silence be meaningful to an AI making a decision. So the key word here, meaningful. And the answer, of course, is C. Silence can count as no evidence against a conclusion. Legal reasoning often treats absence of information as provisional evidence until contradicted. So, key aspect here that you see where the logical knowledge bases here are making connections based on not just what types of relationships are being defined, but also which ones lack definition, which will be absence of information as provisional evidence of otherwise until contradicted by something else, typically with these types of systems affirmative to the contrary. That said, I hope everyone kind of got a little bit more in-depth thing here. This was a very scholarly, erudite paper. It was probably not easily accessible, but I thought through making the presentation like this, we could get the prime examples that were taken out of it, really illustrating the fundamentals that are underlying this AI revolution we see going on right now, which all starts with the foundational levels of the logic that's driving these systems. And understanding those fundamentals really helps everybody see what kind of impact they're having on not just our lives, but in society as a whole. With that said, I thank you all for attending. I don't know if there's any members here, but there was a members only live stream option that YouTube has been promoting, and being I'm trying to get some membership up, I thought I would just instead of silently objecting to silently comply and just post one of these live stream transitions into a members only live stream. So if there's any interest, I'll go ahead and do that. I guess it would take a few minutes or whatever. It does a transition over, and then I was hoping to open up a live panel if there was enough interest. If not, we'll probably do it another night because this is a Sunday night.
Great per EG5, he says. So can machines think?
Well, what do you think? Do you think this has solved that problem of machines thinking just because they can understand to the level that humans do? Or is there something else that we haven't addressed that separates the reasoning of humans, the thinking of humans, from the thinking of machines? And this is again from 1999. So this is the level that we're investigating. Now we're looking at a quarter century later. Can they now think? This is the representation of knowledge through machines, not just through humans. Is there really a distinction at this point that they've evolved to this amount? Not only that, but the intelligence is based on the data set.
Great per EG5, he says they compute, not think.
But at what level, once you escape just the standard computational logic and you get to that non-monotonic logic, right? And then you have extensive data sets going back now. Granted, this is 25 years ago, 30 years ago, 26 years ago. That data set's been accumulating all this time. And as I said at the introduction, although the data is random and miscellaneous, the knowledge is orderly and cumulative. They've been accumulating this data for decades for these systems. So these systems have been being trained progressively for decades with huge, immense data sets. So at that level,
List B 2001 says they lack intuition. They can if this, then that.
but that's where it escapes from the modal logic. And that's what we're getting at here, is that at this point here, we're looking at the papers from the actual scientists that were involved in designing these so-called models that are being used today. These were the foundations. Believe me, they had whatever we're using today back then, and whatever is being used at a different level behind paywalls and such is, I'm sure, far superior to anything that we're aware of. But understanding the underlying logic of it and how it was constructed, you can see how really weak the stuff that we're exposed to today is, because this seems not much more advanced than we're reading about here. But you got to remember, this is, a quarter century ago. Where would we be now if you're reading this 25 years ago and imagining where would we be in 25 years? I think you would expect to be more advanced than we see right now before our eyes. So I think this almost makes one suspect that behind the scenes there's something far more advanced than we're viewing right now. And I just thought that a presentation like this would give food to thought to imagine, what are the capabilities lacking from what we're seeing today, and what capabilities are really being held back from common knowledge right now because of the power of it. And are these machines really thinking behind the scenes and planning more about humanity than humans? So who's to know? Well, that said, I'll leave you with that food for thought. That's all my just opinion and speculation. And with that said, I hope to see you all on the next one. Peace out.
Built image 4426 says take care all. The tribe says, get the like.